I'm here with Michael Cannan, who I haven't seen in a couple of years, but I used to see probably once a week for a couple of years. We're both recovering addict, drunk / nut jobs.
Absolutely. Probably once a week, I'd say, for a good couple of years, wasn't it, at least?
Yeah. Scoot up just a tiny bit closer to the mic. Yeah, a little. Yeah, perfect.
Are we good?
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
How you been, man?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'm doing great.
The last time I saw you, we were talking about recording, and you were in the process of writing a book about your life, was it?
That's correct.
Your mental struggles? Yeah.
A memoir, yes, all of that.
Yes, yeah.
So I remember that, and we talked about it, and then there was another 4-year period of editing and polishing and rewriting and editing, and the obsession that crept into the writing process. So cut to 8 years later, we get a book. Wow. So that was, yeah.
And it's called Hunting Concrete Lions?
Hunting Concrete Lions.
What is that a reference to, or do people need to read it to find out?
No, that's a good point. It's a reference to, I was looking for a way to sort of capture the stories, a sort of a metaphor for the story. And it was about, in a nutshell, codependency. So it was like the idea of searching for happiness outside myself. And the Hunting Concrete Lions, it was based around a story. And I was probably like 14, 15 years old and in a bar with my friend. And we were drinking and shooting the shit as you do. And I remember he'd gone to the bar and come back from the bar with a newspaper under his arm, and he showed me this article about a guy who'd gone off around the world, and he was sort of sleeping with these wealthy women, and he was getting paid to almost like a male gigolo sort of thing. And we're 14, 15 years old, and we're thinking, this is bloody brilliant. Like, this is what I want to do with my life. So as you know, the story gets embellished, and it's like, can you imagine going to America and like meeting a woman who had loads of money, and imagine a big house with a pool and a jacuzzi and concrete lions on the gateposts. So, you know, the moral is be careful what you wish for, because it was really that story of searching for something outside of me. Basically, make everything look good on the outside so nobody will know how I feel on the inside.
Well, I'm sure none of the listeners can relate to that. God, it's such a universal theme. Yeah. And yet so many of us battle with it every fucking day. I mean, how many times in the last month have we all said, I'm doing fine, when we're having a day when maybe we're not?
Sure.
How about you?
Yeah. Do you know, of late, I've been fortunate that things are going really well. That was not the case. So I set the bar really low with regards to mental illness. So, you know, when I can wake up and stay in that frame of mind, for many, many years, certainly, you know, fine comes in, and there are days when I can say, hey, and maybe I'm not being as emotionally honest as I could be. But as a rule, at the minute, things are good. So I'm on that, I'm enjoying that space. Yeah. And, yeah.
I love too that you said at the minute, because that's all we can really worry about.
Absolutely.
Scooch forward just a couple of inches.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Did you get married since I last saw you, or no?
Absolutely not. You know, I'm good at one or two things. Sex relationships is not one of them.
Oh, well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
You're from the Isle of Wight.
Isle of Man.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Oh,
easily
that
done.
is such a fucking American thing to say.
You know, you Canadians.
You're from Ireland, England, whatever.
Australia.
Same thing.
Australia's the one.
New Zealand. Yes.
Yeah, Australia. What part of Australia are you from?
Yeah. How is the Isle of Man accent different than mainland UK?
I would say it's sort of in the middle. You've got a mixture there. Southern Scotland's the nearest point, so you've got a mixture of sort of Northern Ireland, Southern Scotland, Northern England. Yeah,
because I do hear the Scottish thing a little bit.
Yeah. So it's right in the middle of that sort of melting pot there.
Yeah. The Isle of Man, what was it like growing up there? For people that don't aren't familiar with it, describe what it's most famous for, et cetera, et cetera.
I think most people, it's about 35 miles long by 15 miles. So it's right in the middle of the Irish Sea. And I would say it's most famous. They have a motorbike race each year called the Isle of Man TT races. And these guys go at like 200 mile an hour just flying around this racetrack. They convert the one road on the the main road on the Isle of Man into a racetrack.
That's such an important distinction, is because when you use the word racetrack, it is a road going through villages.
Right.
Where it's past someone's driveway.
Right.
Mailboxes.
Yeah.
Trees. Post offices, dogs roaming around.
And they're all obstacles. And I remember one year I would marshal a place called the Mountain Mile. So my job would be to throw stones at the sheep to keep them off the track. Because the bikes would hit the animals, and obviously at 200 mile an hour, it's not a pretty sight,
Yeah, and would the driver be killed, the rider?
Yes, most time. I think they've had somewhere like 269 deaths since it began.
Isn't it generally like a couple of years or something like that?
And the rest, yeah. Not including people who are watching and
right.
all this. The population doubles, so there's so many bikes and so many accidents, it's just a shit show. It's
some of the most fascinating footage I've ever seen.
It's incredible.
Especially the on bike cameras.
Crazy.
You're like, how... my asshole tightens just watching it.
Me too. That's why I don't have a motorbike. I saw it and I was like, no. And parents, you're not having a motorbike. And I was like, that's okay with me. No problem.
So is everybody, for the most part on the island, into it, or do a lot of people hate it?
That's a good question.
The people that what's the general consensus?
I think they enjoy it, and I think they're glad when it's over.
So kind of like a little town after ski season's
yes.
over. We filled our bank accounts, but
yeah, we're done.
Yeah, go back.
Yeah.
What are in a broad stroke? What are the main issues from the past and today that you've struggled with?
Oh, how long have we got? The main issues from the past.
And how old are you?
42, coming up on 42, so 41, okay. 42
okay.
much. From the past, alcoholism, obviously, addiction. The earliest stuff would have been everything from food, attention seeking, depression at sort of 16, 17, serious mental illness, psychosis, 16, 17.
You've been in psych wards?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. They've got a bench named after me at one of them.
Are you serious?
No. They will have one.
You sold that, man. You sold that.
I nearly had you, yeah.
Was it a concrete lion bench?
Yeah, it should be. It should be. But, no, so basically the whole gamut of mental illness. Okay. I mean, I could get into specifics of all of it.
Where would you like to start? If you can think of any moments from childhood that kind of paint a condensed picture. I
was thinking about this because I know the childhood's a big factor in the show, and I was looking back and I was thinking it triggered a memory of being 4 years old and going to 4 or 5 years old and being at my first few days at school. And I remember we were in art class and we were stood around a table, and I remember needing to go to the toilet. And rather than putting my hand up and saying I needed to go to the toilet, I just pissed myself.
Wow.
And I can remember the intense burning in my face of shame, and how all the other children were taken away because they didn't want to shame one child, but one child was left there with a pool of piss all over the floor.
Wow.
And I can remember, those moments. So that behavior was going to carry with me for many years, that inability to ask for help. I'd rather piss myself and be ashamed than ask for help. It was one of those. But that was that. And I think, why was it so difficult at that age to say, can I go to the toilet? Phew. No idea.
In your house growing up, what were your needs recognized? Or was it every man for himself kind of a deal, or what?
The first, I would say the first 10 years, you know, I've looked back, and it's funny because the layers of the onion sort of thing, more comes off as you go through it, and more's revealed and all the rest of it. But I was very fortunate. I had two parents that loved me. They, you know, I did well at school, played a load of sport, had a load of friends. Both parents loved their sport, so they were sort of exercise junkies. There was a lot of, you know, it was like pass the baton, like a relay. One would go off up around the mountain running, come back. The next one would go off around the mountain running. So there was that aspect of it. Did I get my needs met? That's a really good question. You know, maybe the expression of love. I haven't got I'd have to think about a decent answer to that with regards to what were my needs. I think my hunch is, if you have to think about it, that answers the question. Probably something was missing, but sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth. No, exactly. When I look back, the big one was the divorce at 11, when everything seemed to be picture perfect, and then there was this divorce, which for me at that point there was the turning point, for sure. So I have a fondness for these years here. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I was privileged in many ways that I didn't, I didn't have the verbal and physical abuse or whatever, but it was, that turning point at 11 years old, I would say, was a big one.
Something I see a lot too is that the manner in which an adult expresses love and the manner in which a child wants to receive love sometimes don't connect. Right. So it's not a matter of one person being at fault. It's just the pipeline for that love being delivered kind of hits a snag. For instance, a kid may love cuddling, but the parent's not a cuddler, but is good at giving verbal compliments or something. And I wasn't even aware of that being a thing until my therapist told me to look into this thing called the languages of love. There's 5 languages of love. Okay. And it's a really good thing for couples to explore, especially earlier in their relationships, so that you know which ones are important. So it could be physical contact, having your undivided attention, saying nice things, helping me, buying gifts, stuff like that, which I've always found to be like the least important one. But that's just me. Right. Sorry for getting off on a sidetrack there, but talk about the divorce.
The divorce, you've just triggered a thought there I'm thinking now about, which was another thing as you go through and reflecting back and going, at that age, what age was it when I had that disconnect from the head and the heart, which is the point where, as a young lad, you learn that it's not okay to feel. And I think that would be the thing with having my needs met. It would be to sort of circle around to that point would be, don't cry, don't express any emotion, don't be a pussy, don't be a wimp. And, Dad was very athletic and on the football pitch, so you've got that sort of socialization process taking part, and then you've got these social mandates of the athlete. You're going to have to show up on the sports field, or that hasn't come into play at that age, but the inability to feel and express feelings and emotions and having somebody receive them and hold the space for them, I think in that area there the needs weren't getting met.
That is sadly so common. And I wonder how many parents are even aware that you are not helping your child by telling them what to feel. I know they probably think they're preparing their children for a chaotic and cruel world, but I think there's probably other ways, and they're going to discover that on their own anyway. It just seems so much better to give them tools to cope with their feelings than to tell them, don't feel what you're feeling.
And particularly for guys as well, I think it's compacted. Those be a man, those 3 words, be a man. Oh, Isn't that at the heart of
I think
depression for guys? I would say absolutely at the root of it.
I think the two most toxic ones are telling boys, you know, that you have to be macho or be a man and you can't cry, and telling girls that you have to be polite, that it's ladylike to be polite,
right? To
not stand up for yourself,
that's great,
to you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So continue.
So that would have been the first, I'd have said, you know, disconnection at that age. That from the head and the heart, that's a big one. Because that's been a long journey.
What do you remember about the particulars of the divorce? Was it nasty?
Who did you live with? The thing is that it was just very simply everything. I didn't hear the parents argue. There was no build up to this breakdown. I remember sitting at the dining room table and being told sort of Dad was leaving to be closer to work, and work was half a mile down the road. And Dad
what was work's name?
Work, yeah, right.
How old was work?
How old was work? Yeah. Oh dear. So, and then of course you're in a small town, and to try and protect a lie in a small town, I mean, good luck with that. But I remember my sister got to express the emotion. She was like, fuck yeah, bye. Or she probably didn't swear, but those were the general kids. So she was off. But as the younger brother, this was what I thought. You're not old enough to know what's going on here, so keep your mouth shut. So that's when I really stuffed the feelings. So I just kept quiet. And that was my MO. Like, I'm just going to shut down. I'm just going to say nothing because I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want to. But then I started to concoct a story to fulfill, like Dad's moving so that if anybody asked me, I had a story to tell the people at school as to why Dad's going down to be closer to work, and he's got a new car, and we're going to Disneyland next year. And, you know, I go to school and I find out from school what's going on, and Dad's got somebody on the side, and, you know, so then I've got the shame of like trying to protect this lie that I'm not supposed to know about. So it was all the lies, the family secrets, you know. Nobody's meant to know what's going on. And
the elephants in the room. And I can, you know, I get it. And it's not to point the finger at them. I would preface all this by saying it's not. I know that they had their reasons for doing what they did. And we all make mistakes, and we all unintentionally hurt people.
Yeah. So that was protecting that, and then sort of, you know, walking around thinking, what's wrong with me? And thinking everybody knew what was wrong with me. And the sort of the shame and the paranoia. Mm-hmm. The paranoia.
And the funny irony is nobody thinks about us as much as we think other people are thinking, or want them to think about us.
Yeah.
It's an awful truth. It's a fantastic and awful truth at the same time.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So much of life is not personal. It has nothing to do with us.
No.
So then what's the next step? So the divorce, you shut down.
So really shut down. So went from doing well at school, playing the sports, to like, fuck life. I'm going to go off and I'm going to do and that's when I found, you know, the substances, alcohol, drugs, and they worked. You know, they changed the way I felt about myself. So
was it hard to score drugs on the Isle of Man?
It was. You had to be good. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't so much the heroin started at about 15, but the alcohol, going up to the local golf club and drinking and stuff and realizing I like this. Was
it legal for you to drink at that age?
No, absolutely not.
What's the legal age
I think you could be in a bar at 16, but I think it was 18.
Okay. Heroin at 15.
Heroin at 15.
You wasted no time.
No time, straight in.
What was your thought process at 15 going right for...
Fuck it.
Fuck it, huh? You wanted oblivion.
Yeah, give me it. Yeah, there was no... I'm not sitting there thinking, I'm feeling a lot of shame here and I can't... I've got nobody to express it to. I'm thinking, that works. Give me more of that.
Look at my pimples. I feel overwhelmed.
So, oh dear.
How did you go about doing heroin for the first time, finding it, who I'm always amazed by people in their, at such young ages. How does that, I mean,
there's always one guy that you know is doing it.
Yes.
So you find him and befriend him.
In my high school, etc., nobody that I knew of did or had heroin. So that's why I'm kind of curious about it. Everything else, acid, etc.
Okay, on a small island as well, it was difficult to get it in. So the price doubled when it came in. So you really had to sort of know. And, I just struck lucky. Found the right guy at the right time.
You were junkie lucky.
And the best bit was, I said to myself, because I'd seen all the posters around town, with the skull and crossbones and the needles instead of the crossbones and stuff. And I thought, if I smoke it, I won't get addicted. Yeah. So I'm just have a casual smoke. There's no way. And, so.
I love that there's a poster showing the danger of heroin as a guy goes by at 200 miles an hour on a motorcycle.
The irony.
So you started smoking it, and how long until you felt like it had a grip on you?
Years, I think. I mean, I smoked it and then I stopped. Gotcha. And then I had a relationship breakdown, and that really triggered, I need this now. That was a few years later. But yeah, the heroin, probably the physical stuff, I started to have that flu-like symptoms, and the physical stuff started to set in. So I was like, okay, do a little bit more. That miraculously relieved the flu-like symptoms. So, then you're into this, then taking tablets, like Vicodin-type tablets to offset it. Then you're in the mix. Yeah.
What's next? When did the first mental breakdown?
I was just going to say it. So after this little heroin binge, and I started on ecstasy. So I started taking ecstasy, and I was shooting ecstasy and stuff. And that's when the panic attacks started. So I had these really severe panic attacks.
But not while you were on ecstasy.
Not while I was on ecstasy. Yeah. This was after I was on ecstasy.
Gotcha.
So that started, and it was absolutely terrifying. I remember having that first panic attack and just thinking, I'm dying. I mean, my heart was racing for about 50 minutes, and I drove to the emergency wing, and I thought, if I drive in there, they're going to put me in the nut house. So there's no way I'm going into the hospital. But I didn't really know whether it was something physical or something mental or what was going on.
So you just hung around?
So I just hung around, and I drove around the countryside, and I drove around, and then it subsided, and then it came back, and then I hid in the house, and then I gradually I was having these panic attacks right throughout the day consistently. So it became safer just to be in the house. Yeah.
Describe all the symptoms that you can think of that you would feel.
The room going into tunnel vision, heart racing off the chart, sweating, shaking, clammy hands, just spinning, the room spinning.
Wow.
And then just huge fear right through.
That's intense.
Consistently. And I couldn't tell anybody.
Holy shit.
Because I was, it was, but when I look back now, it was brutal.
That poor kid.
Oh my God. Have I had to do some work on that?
A previous guest that we had, and you might have listened to his episode, but Dan Harris talked about medicating himself with cocaine and ecstasy. And then he's a network news anchor for ABC News, and he had an on-air panic attack.
Right.
Hosting the national news. But it was after he had started doing ecstasy and other kinds of drugs. But go ahead.
So that had started, and then it just became more and more sinister, that I started to think that the TV was talking to me.
Wow.
And this is the interesting bit, is the religious delusions started to come up. And this, there was a lot of religion growing up, and I could see that what was happening is, I could get into that, but what was happening here in this sort of psychosis was, my mum had this spiritual experience that she'd shared with me. And I remember, because because my first fears, I remember being in church, you know, and this idea of heaven and hell and the fire and the brimstones and all that
God's
stuff.
watching you. And
God's watching the power, all that sort of stuff. And I remember Mum had this sort of spiritual experience, and she'd shared it with me. And it was, you know, she'd turned her life to Christianity. She'd found something that worked for her, and she turned her life to that. So I remember praying all the time and saying, Jesus, you've got to help me, and on my knees, and, you know, every night praying for this experience to happen. And it wasn't happening. So I'm thinking, there's something, I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. And was there a denomination that she belonged to, or was it just a general Christianity?
General Christianity thing, yeah. So this is sort of going on, and I reflected on this because this started to come out in the psychosis, where I thought Mum was so pure that I must be the devil. And I remember thinking it was the family secret that they'd cut my tail off at birth, and that really I'd had this big forked tail. So I was sitting in the house, and I would sit there. Yeah, it's crazy, innit? I would sit there, and I would be just gripping the armrest, like and I would look in the mirror, and it was like my face would morph into like this demonic type. I mean, it was terrifying.
And how old were you at this point?
I was probably 17, going on for 18.
Fuck! I mean, teenagers are evil, but that's over the top.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And I can feel, as I'm talking about it now, I'm like, I must sound crazy. But it was really genuinely going on.
It's heartbreaking.
It's just...
It is not the first. We had a couple on Mark and Julia Lukács, and she had psychosis with religiosity, and she was committed to a psych ward. Yeah. And she thought she was the devil. And that...
There you go.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and that stuck with me. So at this point, I'm agoraphobic. I'm stuck in the house. I'm so terrified of it.
Was it nice at Halloween that you didn't have to get a costume?
Ah, dear. Can you...
Every door like, yes, I know. It's an amazing costume. It's so lifelike.
You don't even have to sing.
Give me the candy.
Yeah, you don't even... Because we had to sing when we went to the doors, like Hop Tune it was called, so we'd have to sing a riff. But no, that wasn't happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you let somebody know that you were experiencing this?
I remember breaking down, I think, at one point, and my mum, who was still in the house, saying, you know, if it carries on, you're going to really have to go to the nut house, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And eventually going to the doctor, but I couldn't tell the doctor the truth. So I would go to the doctor and, you know, get this... We went on several times. I ended up on this sort of low-dose antidepressant. Didn't do anything. And so it just carried on, and it carried on. And then I was drinking, and the drinking started to make me feel sort of okay. Mm-hmm. You know, there was enough of a sedative. So this went on for a couple of years of just going backwards and forwards with the doctor, and eventually the doctor...
And this was a general practitioner, not a psychiatrist?
Not a psychiatrist, just a general practitioner. And I started a university course in that state. And I look back now, and it's beyond me how I managed to get to university, do the first term. I dropped out after the first term, but even then I remember sitting in the doctor's office and going, just fucking tell him the truth. Just go in there, tell him you're fucked. Tell him you need the strongest, just take whatever they give you and get on with it. And I went in there, and he said to me, is there anything you want to share with me? And I said, no. You know,
isn't that amazing?
Isn't
it amazing?
Could not get the words out. Couldn't do it.
What would you, if you could go into a time machine and go back and talk to your 17-year-old self, what would that kid want to hear, and what would you want to say to that kid?
Fucking get off. Go and ask for help. Go and tell the truth of exactly what is going on.
And what do you think he would have said?
Yeah, fuck off.
You got a lighter?
So, complete inability to ask for help or to tell anybody what was going on. The shame was so deep. My biggest, the fear of ending up in a nut house, it just wasn't going to happen.
And the fear that you were the devil.
I was the devil.
And that you were going to be revealed.
I even at one thought, I thought that I'd had the 666 tattooed somewhere on my body, and I was trying to, where is it? Is it somewhere I can't see it? I mean, it was just dark.
So dark.
Yeah.
So then what?
So then I go to university, drop out, come home, and that's when I went to the doctor and said, look, I'm at that point, I had to do something. And he increased, I still didn't tell him the full truth, but I told him enough to get an antidepressant that it was one of the old tricyclic ones that sort of...
Those were like the first wave of antidepressants.
And so we said at that time, what I did get though, I remember being with a friend's girlfriend. The three of us were in a room, and she'd been prescribed diazepam, Valium. And she'd given me one, and it was like, for the first time, I felt normal after taking this tablet. So I bought a few off her, and I couldn't leave the house without them. So I had to know, even for up to the age of 30, I was still, up to the point of getting sober, I was still walking around I couldn't leave the house without a Valium in my pocket. I didn't take it, but I had to know it was there in case I had the panic attack.
Wow.
So so it sort of gave me the psychological advantage that I could function and get from A to B, as long as I knew I had this
exit door.
And so that was that.
There was a question I wanted to... Before that, we were talking about... Did you share with that doctor that you were experiencing psychosis, or was he just only knew about the depression and anxiety?
Anxiety? No, I couldn't bring myself to mention.
When did you first reveal that to someone, or it was revealed without you wanting to?
The second psychosis.
Talk about that.
So, the first time I'd gone into rehab, I'd have been 30... What would I have been? 30? I think I was 31 when I went into rehab. And I'd been in rehab 9 days. And I started to just have lots of rushes. It started with lots of rushes, like this rushing feeling, almost like you would get on ecstasy. And I started to just be up late at night, writing lots of shit that was just bullshit, but I thought it was incredible.
Was it mania?
God, yeah. And so I'm writing lots of stuff, and then I'm starting to reflect back on all this stuff that I'd learned, like religious stuff. So I decided, right, I'm going to rewrite the Bible. So then...
Why not?
Why not?
I mean,
I've got the energy right now, man.
Sure.
I'm up at 3 and 4 in the morning, and I'm in the treatment center.
And you can also chime in from the devil's point of view.
I've got the devil. I can get both sides of the story.
It's a round table with just you.
Yeah.
In that moment, you're God, but you've also been the devil.
And I got even more sides to the story as this episode increased.
Okay.
So this was sort of going on, and then I'm sitting in this. We had this area where people just sat and smoked in treatment. Now, when I went into treatment, I was like, I wasn't going in to get sober. I was going in just to let everybody know that I wasn't really a heroin addict. There was, definitely didn't have a problem with alcohol. Just going to let them know 30 days, nice treatment center or whatever.
Get the heat off.
Get the heat off, basically. Yeah. But I'm having this sort of experience. And so I'm sitting in this garden, and I decided that I was being abducted by aliens. So I'm sitting in this garden, I'm like, they're all aliens and they're going to abduct me. And then I decided that I was on the Truman Show. You've seen the Truman Show?
I have. And you're not the first person who has described that experience. Yeah.
And then I was having such an awakening that I decided I was the second coming of the Messiah himself, that I was Jesus. But I was an improved version. I was Jesus Bond.
No.
And I swear, and a guy came into the treatment center on a motorbike with a black helmet, a black BMW motorbike, And I thought he was delivering it for me to go and save the world. So I started trying to take the helmet off him in the middle of the treatment center and said, the bike's for me. I'm going to save the world.
Oh, my God.
I just got started to get darker and darker. And so next minute, and a guy walked past me and he said to me, the air is free. And it completely flipped me out. It was like somebody doing that in front of me. And
how did it flip you out?
The clarity that I'd got everything wrong my whole life. That I'd taken everything for granted. That nothing was what it was. I mean, I was sitting in this treatment center and I was back in the Garden of Eden. I was eventually curled up on a bed, like back in the womb. And I was burning, absolutely burning, sweating. And I could feel my heartbeat once. And they called the fire brigade, I think it was, or the police or whatever they do. They came in the room and they had the defibrillators on me. I mean, I'm trying to eat a plant because I'm thinking I'm back in the Garden of Eden. I'm having all these, like, I got it all wrong, like everything's provided for. I've chased money, power, and prestige my whole life, and it's nothing to do with that. And, like, here I am, and it was all in front of me all along. How could I have been so stupid? And then this whole regression thing was going on.
So the clarity you had, was that a hallucination, quote, clarity, or a genuine moment of clarity?
A genuine moment of clarity in the middle of madness.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that. Can you explain that some more?
All the religious stuff that stuff from the Bible was making sense to, where it's written in allegory and metaphor, isn't it? And I'd taken it literally. So I didn't understand that if certain things meant, the fruit means one thing, water means life, like, and if you can do them, I'm not religious, by the way, in any shape, form, but, I think. So this is going on, and I'm having the clarity of all these things, like bits of wisdom are coming into my head and making sense. And at the same time, I'm in the middle of this madness. So it's hard to get your head around, isn't it? That this is going on. So it's sort of flipping in and out of, I'm out of my mind at this stage. I'm completely like gone.
And the people at the rehab, obviously you're eating plants, you're trying to take helmets off of people.
The thing was, this was the interesting thing. The thing was, they were trying to put medication in my mouth, and I kept refusing it because I thought it was a test. I thought it was a test to see if I'd really woken up or not. And if I needed the medication, it would show that I was still asleep. So they were trying to put the medication in my mouth, and I was spitting it out and stuff, and they were like, you got to take the medication, you got to take the medication. So then I didn't. And I find myself on a bed, curled up in a ball in the fetal position, thinking I'm back in the womb. Police, fire brigade, whatever, come in, cart me out on a gurney, take me into an ambulance, and I'm thinking I'm getting taken away by aliens at this point. And they take me to what I now know is Santa Monica, UCLA, and I am out of my mind. And I'm in Santa Monica, UCLA, and I'm lying there on the bed, and the David Letterman show is playing on the screen. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, they're going to kill me. And there's a security guard in front of me, and he's got a gun by the side of his leg. And I'm looking at the David Letterman show, and then I'm thinking, they're projecting me live on the Late Show with David Letterman right now. I have to kill myself live on the Late Show with David Letterman to save the world, and then the show's over.
Wow.
And then the thoughts went to, what you need to do is take the security guard's gun, put it in your mouth, and pull the trigger, and the director's going to come and shout, okay, cut, show's over, you've done it, you've passed. So I was going through this thing, you pussy, take his gun. You're a pussy, take his gun. You have the balls, go up there, take his gun and do it. And this was going on in my head, and I couldn't do it. And I was shuffling forward to the end of the bed and thinking, right, big guy like this in front of me, I was like, and then I decided, like, fuck it, I'm going. For somehow they had my bag there, and I decided, fuck it, I'm going. And the security guard jumped on me, pinned me down, and they put me in 4-point restraints. And thank fucking God as well. I'm thinking about this now, what was going on in my head.
And did you realize, even in your state then, that if you put the gun in your mouth, you would be dead? Or did you think
No, I thought it was just on a show. I thought it was just like these were actors as part of the show, and this was a test to see if I'd really woken up or not.
I see. Wow.
I'll bring this full circle because there's a really good point to this in a minute, which is really fascinating.
How did Paul Schaefer react to you doing all of that?
Paul Schaefer, which is
he's the Letterman sidekick.
Aiding and abetting.
Go ahead.
Paul Schaefer. Oh dear.
So he jumps on you. The guard jumps on you.
He jumps on me, puts me in these 4-point restraints, and they start trying to inject me with whatever the fuck they're trying to do to knock me out. And some guy's reading what I now know is the 51 involuntary psychiatric, but he was shaking when he was reading it, so I thought he was an actor who just didn't have his shit together. And so this was going on. But then, there was some dark twist, because I'm in these, and I'm thinking they're going to hobble me. Do you remember in that, what was that film where she hobbles him when his feet are in the restraints?
Oh, Misery? Yeah.
I'm going to get hobbled, because now they've got me in these restraints. I'm thinking, fuck. And the dark thoughts that were going on in my head at that time were just way out there. But the interesting thing was, this guy...
Oh, no, this is all interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's not still like, with me. Don't worry, it's going to get interesting.
Okay, yes. So this guy kept coming round the corner and saying to me, "Are you willing to tell the truth yet?" And I was like, fuck you, to tell the fucking truth. The backstory to the last, the 10 year... my story is like Pinocchio. That's the director's cut version. I didn't know how to tell it. Every bit of my life was just a lie or an embellishment or bullshit or whatever. So he came around the corner and he kept saying to me, I'll never forget him, he had a black and white shirt on, and he sits next to me and he had this gold boxing glove on a chain round his neck. And he's sitting there and he said, "Are you ready to tell the truth yet?" I'm saying, "Fuck you, blah, blah, blah." And he goes off and he comes back again. He goes, and this is God knows how long this went on for. And I get to a point and I think, if I'm going to die, I want to purge my soul before I go. Maybe that's like, and I kept hearing, "Know the truth and the truth will set you free. Know the truth and the truth." Like that was going on in my head. So we sit down and I said, "Okay." And he said, "Okay, start with, what drugs have you done?" And so I start the confession. I'd done marijuana and alcohol and heroin and crack. And have you ever slept with prostitutes? Yeah, I slept with you. You owe a lot of money, don't you, Michael? Yeah, I owe a lot of money. This was going on and on and on. I don't remember anything after that other than falling asleep. I must have passed out or whatever. But I woke up the next day completely clear. Zero signs of the night before. I'm still in a set of 4-point restraints. Mm-hmm. But I had no signs of the delusions from the night before. Clear. Terrified. But like, what the fuck just went on? But I'm back with the program, sort of thing. And I would say I haven't felt threatened by alcohol or drugs since that day. So I've been sober since that time till today. The interesting bit is, later on I was like, what the fuck went on there? You know what I mean? What was that all about? And so I started Googling. After a few years sober, I started to Google, like, thought I was Jesus, It
sounds like bipolar psychosis.
Well, yeah. Well, they when I got into the treatment center, they took me to a secure nut house, like, right. Maximum security, people with names carved all over their arms, real good stuff, The bed, sink and toilet all molded to the floor, nowhere to hang yourself, shoelaces gone, and I'm sitting there, but I'm clear-headed. This was the bit that I was like, I feel okay. Now, you can't tell people that after that episode, because they're like, that was nuts, you're nuts, and you're staying in here. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, so it was one of those situations. And later on, I find out, so I start to search, like, how does this, what went on there? And I came across the work of a guy called John Weir Perry. And he'd set up a place called Diabasis in San Francisco. And there was actually a section now in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for spiritual emergencies. So whereas the psychosis, the spiritual emergency plays out the same as a psychosis, so it appears the same. And this guy was taking people in acute psychotic episodes to a place in San Francisco. He was monitoring them. Rather than medicating them, he was loving them. And about 70 to 80% were going into immediate remission. They were able to go through this mythological reintegration of the psyche.
What?
Right through. Yeah, no kidding. I found this book called Trials of the Visionary Mind, Spiritual Emergency and the Renewal Process. And what was happening for me was like a complete reintegration of the myth of my life into something of a healthy worldview. And I read this book, and it was just all these case studies of right back, like American Indians and people. And I was reading it, and I was like, these people have gone through the same thing. And it just made sense. And I was reading it because I hadn't had any signs. Since that day, I've not had any signs of the same thing.
Wow.
It was fascinating. Yeah, it was really fascinating stuff. So whereas it could be deemed psychosis, it shows up as now they have a section called Spiritual Emergency. And there was fascinating work. John Weir Perry, Stanislav Grof did a load of great work on it. Very interesting stuff.
I had heard that term before, but I had always kind of been skeptical that was a thing. But I've heard enough people talk about it now, people that I know are credible people that,
I describe it now as like a spiritual awakening. That's the only way I could describe it.
You know, it makes sense too, because the power of love, if it is a psyche thing and it's not a chemical thing, it's amazing what it can repair, what it can heal.
And the information in the body, when it gets now, what it takes to get to that point of that so much fragmentation, and then, you know, just rupture and repair or whatever it is to get to that point. Who knows? For me, I think the liberating part was the honesty part. You know, the being able to confession.
I see.
You know, that for me was, I mean, if you want to refer to that as a love and somebody holding the space to be able to have that confession type thing, hell yeah, absolutely.
So the purging of the truth for you was kind of what unclogged the thing.
I look back on that and go, you know, if you look at the lies and manipulation that preceded that, I mean, to have that moment of telling the truth for probably the first time, confessing to stuff, you know, like the age-old principle, like you would go and sit with a priest or something and tell him you do a confession there, that type of stuff. Right. Or, you know, maybe inventory work in recovery. Right. So that certainly...
looking back, can you describe the vibe of the guy that you did this with, whatever you can remember? If you can, if not, no big deal.
It was so sinister at the time, to be honest with you. It was, you know, he was just matter of fact, you know? Yeah. Just like, tell the truth.
Okay, so it's not like he was this incredibly empathic...
No, that was not...
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, that was not the case at all.
So you were just so fed up, you were like, well, fuck, I might as well tell the truth, right?
Yeah, I thought, thinking I was going to die.
If you didn't.
I was going to die, so if I died, I had the idea of that I was going to be free if I told the truth.
I see.
You know, that was the...
And you know what? In kind of a sense, that was true.
Absolutely.
You were certainly headed towards a place that wasn't good if you kept all that stuff inside.
Yeah.
So maybe you are the devil.
Maybe. You just never know.
This interview is over.
Get done. Get done.
Wow, man, that is some intense shit. Wow.
I certainly had better days, you know.
So, How do you feel today? You haven't had any remission as far as the psychosis. You've been sober now for how many years?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
What are the day-to-day things then that you struggle with? Is it hard being as handsome and fit as you are? Is it a burden?
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst feeling. I have to work so hard at it, though.
Please tell me you're miserable being so fit and handsome.
Every day.
Thank God.
Oh, the worst. Day-to-day struggle. I feel like a fraud because I have such a good life today. You know, I really do.
That's okay, man. If you can't think of anything, that's a fucking home run.
And I'd have to give you that hope. I really would, you know, because... And I would just step back a little bit and I'd say, you know, I was put on medication after this experience and I was told I would be on medication for the rest of my life. I was diagnosed bipolar, whatever the hell it was, you're nuts type stuff. Put on medication and I went on that, and there was an interesting part. I got kicked out of America in 2009 and I ended up in the Middle East.
Because your visa ran out?
Yeah, I tried to get back in the country on a visa and... they kicked me out of the country. You're not coming back in. You've been in and out so many times. And they found a business card, accused me of working and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up back in the Middle East. And my mum was living out there. So I was living on a little island called Cyprus, which is...
Yeah. Just south of Greece, right?
Just south of Greece, yeah. So I'm there and I felt really good. And I'd had a chance to do like the repair work with, you know, recovery type stuff. Saying a few apologies and amends to people and so forth. And I felt good. And I just, you know, I was a couple of years into my recovery and I went to see a psychiatrist and I sat down with him. I thought, fuck it, I'm going to just tell this guy the truth. Like, because I had to find a psychiatrist to monitor the medication. So I sit down with this little guy, German guy he was. And he said, tell me what's going on and stuff. And I said, well, I thought I was Jesus. I thought I was the devil. And he's laughing along with me. And he's telling me stories about similar stuff and we're just shooting the shit. And he said, you know what? I would question the diagnosis and I would say that you are more borderline personality that's been affected by shame and guilt and resentment and religion and divorce, like the factors, the trauma factors. And so that opened up the possibility to come off the medication. So I brought my mum in and I said, if you find me walking naked in the street, this is the guy to speak to, Mum, and help me.
And when you say borderline, you mean borderline personality disorder?
Borderline personality disorder, yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, well, whatever. It wasn't quite what I was looking for, but fuck, I'll take whatever I can get at the minute. Yeah. So we came down off the medication for over about 8 months. I came off all the medication, didn't feel any different, didn't have any side effects, came off it. Started to feel, you know, okay. And, you know, what's that, 8 years ago? So I'm completely clean of all medication. So the recovery work mixed with sort of...
So
can I just chip in?
Oh, yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. I wouldn't ever say to anybody, throw your medication away. That's not what I'm saying. If anybody's sort of listening and they're like, well, hey, fuck it. That's not, I did everything under the strict supervision of a psychiatrist.
Thank you for saying that.
And every moment was monitored, always checking in. So that was really important part of it. I felt good enough to do that. And don't get me wrong, I've gone through deep sadness in the last 10 years, you know, and I've not had the depression though. I've not experienced that long periods of like, fuck.
Not getting out of it.
Yeah. I've had thoughts that I've been like, this thought's never going to change and this is never going to look any different. But then it shifted, you know, so there's been like a grieving process, a refeeling process.
Excuse me. Do you, you being diagnosed as having a borderline personality disorder, from my having talked with people and read about it, it can be a really high maintenance personality disorder because there's impulsivity, there's fear of abandonment, there's experiencing, emotions that are 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. And some people have found help through dialectical behavior therapy because it helps them communicate and understand what it is that they're feeling and how to express it. Has that been something that you have looked into, or has it just been such a kind of low-level version of it that it's manageable?
The feeling bit was the critical bit for me. I would say, even up to 3 or 4 years ago, if you'd have asked me how I felt, the best I could have offered you was numb. I knew anger and rage, but I was so shut down emotionally. Like, I remember my grandma dying, and I just remember having and I remember thinking, you callous bastard, cry.
Yeah. To be honest, your grandmother was a bore.
You were intimately. Oh dear. So, that level, the empathy, and that sort of goes back to maybe the childhood stuff, is that the disconnection with the head and the heart, and the inability to feel. Like, if I don't know me, I can't possibly empathize with somebody else.
Right.
So if I can't feel my feeling, if it's not safe to feel my feelings, like the psychic numbing they talk about, then how can I possibly connect with somebody else? And it's taken me, I've done EMDR therapy, which has been really helpful.
Oh, good.
A lot of recovery work, multiple 12-step programs and so forth that have, men's groups, really powerful stuff, just really trying to get back in touch with this, just trying to live a bit more from the heart or whatever.
So your book is called Hunting Concrete Lions.
Yes.
And Michael's last name is spelled Cannan, even though it's pronounced Cannon. Dude, thank you so much for coming and sharing such a fascinating story and opening up. And I know you were nervous before we sat down. Was it as terrifying as you thought it was going to be?
No, it wasn't.
Good.
When I see these microphones and stuff, there's always that anxiety level rises,
Yeah, but I'm a jackass, so why be intimidated?
And I love it.
Yeah. That's so great to see you, man.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks. So great reconnecting with him. And